We recently covered 10 tips that every Flask developer should know, but we left out a pretty big group in the Python web space there, Django developers, and this one's for you. So I've invited Bob Belderbos, who's been running his SaaS business on Python and Django for several years now, to share his tips and tricks for working with Django. This is Talk Python to Me, episode 277, recorded July 19th, 2020. Welcome to Talk Python to Me, a weekly podcast on Python, the language, the libraries, the ecosystem, and the personalities. This is your host, Michael Kennedy. Follow me on Twitter where I'm at mkennedy. Keep up with the show and listen to past episodes at talkpython.fm, and follow the show on Twitter via @talkpython. This episode is brought to you by Linode and us. Have you heard about the 100 Days of Code Challenge? It's a challenge where you write code for an hour a day for 100 days. It's helped many developers finally master programming, but it can be hard to know what to study or have resources to focus on. That's why we wrote not one, but two 100 Days of Code courses. 100 Days of Code in Python, which covers mostly pure Python, and 100 Days of Web in Python, which covers a whole spectrum of web frameworks and concepts. If you've been thinking about taking the 100 Days of Code challenge, be sure to visit training.talkpython.fm and check out our courses. They are the 100 days of projects and lessons with a tidy bow on top just for you. Bob, welcome back to Talk Python to Me.
Thank you, Mike. It was nice to be here.
Hey, man, it's good to have you back. Good to be catching up with you. You know what we should be doing is we should be catching up in Pittsburgh and having a beer, but instead we're meeting on the podcast on Skype, and that's second best.
Yeah, there was no PyCon this year. Rub it in.
I know. You and Julian both had flights from quite far away to come hang out there, and it didn't happen, did it?
It didn't happen. It will happen next year.
It will. It's hard to see it now, but life will go back to normal, mostly. I think eventually we'll get this whole deal figured out, but right now it's a bit chaotic. So let's just maybe check in. What have you been up to since the last time you were on? We had you on 2 episodes before. You were on 140, which was a big one where we kind of met each other and whatnot, talking about 100 Days of Code projects. Ultimately, we went on to write a couple of courses, the 200 Days of Code for like Python and web Python stuff together. And you were also on episode 224, 12 lessons from 100 Days of Web, which is sort of ties into that as well. So seems like you're on with the tips here. That's a good set of topics.
Yeah, a lot of Django, always on the platform.
So what have you been up to since back then? That was back in 2019, about a year ago.
2019. Okay, so yeah, obviously the platform is still growing. That's all in Django.
Not everyone knows what the platform is, right? So tell people about your Code Challenges platform and what's going on there, because this is a place that you've been running. How long have you been running Code Challenges for?
Since the end of 2017.
Right, so 3 years of running production level Django stuff, running it on Heroku and doing other interesting things. So a lot of the tips are sort of pulled out of that experience, right?
Yes. So it's under codechallenge.es, and it's a platform where people can learn Python through practical exercises, which we have almost 290 now. And yeah, that's pretty exciting. And learned a lot of Django there. And what's going on for the rest? Well, as you already know, I was a Python developer at Oracle till next week, actually.
Next week, which is actually 3 weeks ago. Due to time shifting, because we speak in the future or the past or something like that. But yeah, so from the time of recording, you're just about to wrap up your time at Oracle, yeah?
Yeah, and going full into PyBites, which is pretty exciting. So,
man, congratulations. Congratulations. That's so awesome. So
Thank you.
I think some people would consider it a dream, right? You've made it to the point where you built something, curated it over time, and now it's strong enough to be your full-time job, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it took 3.5 years.
Is that part of that overnight success that just took 10 years type of thing?
Yeah. Well, and it's daily work, right? It's a lot of consistency. But yes, going full on that right now. Yeah.
Awesome. So congratulations. And
thank you.
That just means you're focused more on making your platform run well and obviously growing as a business. Like the secret that a lot of people don't learn until they try is that running a successful software business is like 30% technology.
Yep. Yeah.
So there's a lot more to it, but you still get to focus on your Django side and make the platform even better. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a platform, and we do coaching, so we also help a lot of clients with their Django. So that's a really nice segue. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, I'm looking at the notes that we put together, and there's a lot of tips that we got to go through. So
there's too much. I
feel like we trimmed it down. So
yes.
We're going to see if we can keep it to 10 plus some unspecified number of bonus items as well. So when I think of Django, this first tip that you have, this is like one of the main things that I think of is like it comes with these building block pieces that say Flask and Pyramid and Fast API and whatnot just don't come with, like admin backends.
Yep.
That's where we're going to start, huh?
Yes. So Django clearly comes with batteries included, and some people actually don't like that because they want to roll their own and they think it's opinionated. I happen to like their preferences. And yeah, one of those well-known building blocks is the admin interface. And it's pretty impressive. With a few lines of code, you can just add your model in an admin.py file, and you have the complete CRUD interface, which is probably not for the end user, but as a maintainer of the site, it's pretty convenient. And it's then also very easy to extend it. So, for example, taking an admin class here, you can define some search fields, which makes those fields searchable. You can even have autocomplete fields, which they integrated with JavaScript. You can override the get query set. And yeah, it's a nice way of inheriting from the admin.modelAdmin class. And yeah.
Yeah. So it comes out of the box just, I don't know, I kind of think of it as like Google Sheets or something for your database.
Right.
Where each table is like a tab or a sheet in the workbook or whatever the terminology of Google Sheets is. But the tabs at the bottom, right? Something to, not necessarily the same UI, but that idea that you have like a grid over top of it. But what you're telling me here is I can go and derive special classes that are tied to the various tables or the models more specifically, and it lets you search different aspects of it. It lets you auto completion. You could also say like limit how many items come back in your search results per page, so you don't get a million or something like that, right?
Yeah, or you can do a list filter, for example, and then certain columns at the right side of the page, you can filter on them by clicking just with one line of code. So that's really some cool functionality. And I think maybe in the show notes we can link to a Django Admin cookbook I use a lot, which has like 50 or so tips. And I might have mentioned that before, actually on python-bytes. And I learned a lot from that book. It's like 50 pages. And very workable code.
Super cool. Another thing you can do is you can write a function called get query set and actually do things like pre-join or do a joined queries against other things. Because otherwise you may end up with like the N+1 problem of ORMs where you do one query, then everything that comes back, you have to do more queries per item to try to like fill out the details.
Yeah, I will talk about that in one of the tips. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. That's super cool. Let's see. What else do I want to say about that? Was it you? I think it might have been you, either you or Dan Bader from Real Python, talking about using this to actually trigger events as you interact with this admin. Was that you?
Yeah, I think that was me. Yeah.
So tell us, that's like, I think that's pretty related. Tell people about that. That's pretty cool. We spoke about that on Python-bytes.
Yeah, I think what we did was in one of the admin models, override the save method and then see if the object was created and only then do a certain action, like emailing people. But in hindsight, that's probably better to do with a salary task. But yeah, it's an example how you can override those methods and do certain things. Yeah. Pretty easily.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very cool. All right. Number 2, ORM magic.
Yeah. Well, Django comes with its own ORM, object relational mapper, and it's kind of a proxy to the database. So you don't have to write SQL yourself, although I do enjoy that.
I am such a fan. You worked at Oracle, didn't you? Yeah. I'm such a fan of ORMs actually, or in the NoSQL world, maybe ODMs or some, like a R might not necessarily make sense. But, there's so many issues you can run into if you don't use parameterized queries, little Bobby tables and all those issues. And just like if you get the raw queries back and you pull different values and sometimes you forget to convert this thing to an integer and it's just a string that has an integer in it, that sort of like there can be all these little weird edge cases, right?
No.
Whereas with ORMs, it's like a layer that just separates like how your data should be transformed. And I really love it. I think it's great. I know that it doesn't 100% work all the time, right? There's places where it doesn't, but that's not as, like most of the time it's a beautiful thing.
It's a nice abstraction, and it's way easier to use and more elegant. I would say it's how Django has it's pretty Pythonic. And you have those helper methods, like for example, get object or 404, and it retrieves the object, and if not, it returns
a 404 exception.
Yeah, exactly, or equivalent response, right? So it might be exactly what you need, and you don't even, it's just one method. It's very concise.
Right. So if you just directly went to the objects and said, get me something where like the primary key is such and such, you would get an exception potentially, but it might say an exception, which is does not exist. The model does not exist. And you don't want to tell the user, like what that's going to tell the user is 500 server error, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't stop it. And so this will translate that to basically effectively catch that exception and raise the HTTP 404, which is
the proper response. Yeah. It's sweet. The method is in the shortcuts, so it's clearly like a shortcut. Yeah. And and there are so many things. I can highlight a few. For example, when you get an object, you can also just manually catch the does not exist exception. Nice one is get underscore create, which if the object is in the database, it retrieves it. And if not, it creates it and returns a tuple of the object and then a Boolean created. So I use it in a few places to, sometimes I just want the object, and if it's not there, I want to create it. And you can do that kind of in one line of code. And then the second return a Boolean, the created, you can then say, well, if the object was created, do one thing, or if it was not created, do another thing. And again, it's a shortcut, right?
Interesting. It's like a proactive update or insert, but the other way.
Yeah. Well, update, get it or
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, what else is good in here?
Use filter a lot. You can also use exclude. And then there are those neat, like English-like methods, like first. So, for example, model.objects.first or .last. Or I read about earliest or latest, and those read like English, and they do exactly what you expect them to do, right? So that reads like English, like Python. Then with the querying, for example, if you're filtering, you can use double underscore to, for example, you have a field and then you can do underscore contains.
Is that like a percent?
Like exactly.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, that's in the SQL language. Yeah.
Just to highlight the syntax that it is with double underscore. And you can even link to other models if you go through underscore and then the foreign key fields. And then underscore the attribute. But of course, as we said before, you have to be careful with doing a lot of queries there. But sometimes you just need to reach out to linked models, right?
Yeah.
Then if you want to do like more complex queries, you can use the uppercase Q, the Q objects. So you could do Q if one field is this, or Q if another field is that. So that's a way to concatenate certain conditions.
Right. Because a lot of times you can use filter and put multiple parameters, but you're going to end up with an and, which is...
Exactly. That's a good point. Yes.
You don't always want and. Like sometimes you do, but if you don't, filter's not going to help you. That's
a great addition, because exactly, if you do like filter attribute equals, comma, another attribute equals, they are and. And with the Q, you can do an or, which sometimes is convenient. Yeah. And then we have annotations, so the group by. So, for example, I have a Django tip. We might be able to link to it maybe in the show notes, how we got the most common user names on the platform, which happen to be David, Daniel, and Michael. Just a lot of programmers named like that.
Yeah, I guess so. Interesting. I feel like we almost are going to have to create some gists of your little code samples and then like link to them, right? We could do that.
Yeah, we can totally do that. Yeah, and also this one I really like, that how the code is laid out over multiple lines, as I guess Black would do it. And you're looking at the same code, right? It's pretty elegant, I think.
Yeah, it's super elegant. Yeah, I really like it. And I feel like I write Django RM code all the time, even though I don't use Django. nor do I use a relational database. That's weird, right? And the reason is I use a Mongo engine, which is the ORM, ODM for MongoDB, but it's modeled on Django ORM. So like it's almost identical, as much as it can be being non-relational. So anyway, yeah, it's a really nice API. I do like it. And these are cool. Yeah, we'll put the gist of how you got the most common usernames out of, or first names out of your users. That's cool.
Can link to it. Okay.
I guess hand in glove with ORMs, ODMs is the models that define them, right?
Yeah, nice segue, right? The ORM tree is the models. So let's talk a little bit about the models. A few tricks there I picked up. Auto now add and auto now, which are keyword arguments to model fields.
Is this if like I have a date time, like a created date or a last updated date or something like that?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So if you have an added and an edited field, then the auto underscore now underscore add would add the date upon creation. So typically the added. And the auto underscore now would update every time the row is updated. So that's a nice and easy way to keep track of those dates. Like when was the record created?
Yeah. That's sweet. I love the auto now I love the distinction as well, because sometimes you want it just to default when it's created. And other times like last login or last updated for a CMS page or something would be what you want.
Yeah. And you don't have to write any code. Those are just attributes that come with that field and easy to use. Then we have null versus blank on a field. And the distinction there is that if you say null equals true, then the field can be empty in the database, right? And if you say blank equals true, then it can be empty on the form, right? So if you don't say blank, then and you use a Django form, it might still think that the field is required in a database. So null is for the database and blank is for the form. That's the easy way to remember it.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
Underscore delete is an important one, because if you link models together and you say on delete equals models cascade, then it will recursively, when you delete a record, also delete the related records, the records in the related or linked tables.
Right. So for example, maybe a code challenges, there's a user, the user's done a bunch of challenges, you've saved their results, maybe some other stuff about when they logged in. If you delete the user and you have a foreign key relationship, it's it might even freak out, right? It might say, no, this relationship is required. You can't delete the user because there's entries in the challenge result or whatever. Yeah. And this way it'll wipe out that entire tree, like following those relationships, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it just deletes all their stuff, right? So when I'm in
cascading deletes have always scared me. I've like almost never turned them on my ass because I'm just like, boy, that could go a long ways. That could take more down with it than I actually intended. But it's very valuable and useful, and I totally get it. But it's cool.
If a user wants to leave the platform, right, we have to delete all their data. So I still do it manually. So then in Django Admin, delete user, and then it shows you like all the objects that's going to be deleted. Are you sure about that? And like I always look like a second time, is that indeed the case? And yes, it all ties back to the user. So you don't want to delete a user and have all kinds of ghost objects in the database potentially. So it's actually useful. But if you want to keep the records, you can, instead of models cascade, you can use models set null, and then it keeps the records, but where the foreign key was user, it sets it to null. So that's a good.
So it kind of cascades it. So the relationship's not broken, not in the database's corrupted sense, but it just unwires it. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes like there was a user link, but now it's none. Like it's anonymous now.
This portion of Talk Python to Me is brought to you by Linode. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing your enterprise's infrastructure, Linode has the pricing, support, and scale that you need to take your project to the next level. With 11 data centers worldwide, including their newest data center in Sydney, Australia, enterprise-grade hardware, S3-compatible storage, and the next-generation network, Linode delivers the performance that you expect at a price that you don't. Get started on Linode today with a $20 credit, and you get access to native SSD storage, a 40 gigabit network, industry-leading processors, their revamped cloud manager at cloud.linode.com, root access to your server, along with their newest API and a Python CLI. Just visit talkpython.fm/Linode when creating a new Linode account, and you'll automatically get $20 credit for your next project. Oh, and one last thing, they're hiring. Go to linode.com/careers to find out more. Let them know that we sent you. Yeah, my current systems, if somebody deletes their account, we have a deleted users table next to our users table, and then we just null out all the stuff that identifies them, but we still have the ID. So if I go back and say this user did this thing, I can still trace back that ID and go, oh, that's actually a user that used to exist who deleted themselves.
That's interesting.
So, yeah,
that's cool because you do have then the original data. Yeah.
But this, if you're happy to make it go away, it's really handy because with relational stuff, it's really hard to all right, well, I'm going to traverse all the relationships, and how do you unwind them so that the database will actually accept the delete, right? So this is really nice.
Yeah, cool.
And one more, model managers, right? What's up with that?
Yeah, there is an example that you can define your own model or query. For example, here I linked it to we can link to it, a forecast day manager. And it has a latest method, and it gets the latest forecast date, or does any query really, and then you can just call that method on the object. So model.objects, your method. So it's kind of a nice way to not have all that query logic in the view potentially, but have that in the model where it should be. And then it's like a property, right, where you do a bunch of complex stuff, and then it's just instance dot your property name, which is very clean, right? So I thought that was
write it once and use it in other places without thinking about it, right?
Yeah, and then again it reads like English, and abstract that logic in the model.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, and meta classes, which are not really meta classes. Well, I guess they are, but you can define
database meta, not Python meta.
You can make a class meta in your model, and I don't use it for many things, but for example, I think most common example is that you can define the ordering there. For example, you can say -edit, and then in your admin or whenever you query that model, is then the objects show descend in descending order.
Right. So the default sort if you don't specify one.
Yeah. So
yeah, cool.
That's one example.
Yeah, that's really handy.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Now, so far what we've been talking about, besides my little diversion to Mongo engine, which is not a very common use case, has been mostly Django specific. But this next one that you got here, I feel like a lot of the frameworks have an equivalent, but a lot of people probably don't use them regardless of the framework they're in.
Mm-hmm. And that's the debugging toolbar, right? So going more into the developer toolset, which has been very useful. It's a plugin, so you pip install it. You add it to the installed apps, I believe. And I think there's a middleware as well. So a couple of 2 or 3 settings. And then, of course, you load it only if you are developing locally, or which typically means is when your debug is set to true. Not in production.
That is super, super important. Yeah, there's tools out there that will scan websites for the presence of these debug toolbars and try to pull them up. It's bad news to have them out there. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of vulnerabilities around this actually.
And those are important and easy tweaks. Maybe a little segue. For example, you have like the default -admin /admin. That's super easy to find, right? So it's very easy to in your URLs to make it like my-backend and then make it a little bit more hidden, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know how many people have like pulled up the logs for their website, as in the request logs live, and just go to the server and tell your logs or whatever. You will see untold number of requests for various PHP pages and Node.js pages and whatnot.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with what your site is. They just like, all right, here's the 5 most common backends, wp-admin.php and whatnot, right? They're just looking for them. So surely they're looking for Django admins as well.
Yeah. So watch out with a bit the security. But the main reason I pulled up the debugging toolbar here was a performance story. That on some pages, they became pretty slow. And I thought, okay, it could be more data, more users. But actually then when I start looking at those pages, how they loaded with the debugging toolbar, I saw that, there were actually hundreds and hundreds of queries happening. And that was
Imagine that would be slow.
Yeah.
Especially if the server's on a different, the database is on a different server, physical server or virtual server, right? It's got the network latency and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was actually because I was not using select_related to link models in an efficient way. So when you use select related, it makes one extra query to link up the 2 models. But then every time you access a foreign attribute, so to say, that's already there. It's like a pre-cache. So once I got that in place, then the page became super fast. But the main point was that the debugging toolbar made that super easy to diagnose, right?
Yeah, and I think probably hearing the word debugging toolbar, a lot of people who've not they're like, what is this annoying thing that's on the side of my website? How do I make this go away, right? Like they haven't really explored it. It does catch errors, and to me, like that's the least value that the thing adds. The debugging part is completely, I don't know. I have other tools that tell me that. You can just look at the output and the stack trace, but the real value is in the performance. You can check off things like track the performance of the actual, profiling level of your code and show me where the time is being spent. And then also into the database, right? Like these are the queries that are happening on this page and how many. And if you see like, oh, I'd expect 2 or 3 and there's 500, you're like, oh, this is really broken. Let's figure out why we're going and getting its second table over and over and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Flask has an equivalent one of these. Pyramid has an equivalent one of these. They're awesome. You should definitely check them out. Don't deploy them in production.
Yep.
Number 5.
Yeah, I had extending the user model, and I linked to an article from Simple is Better Than Complex, which is it's a great Django blog. And it's more about strategy, like when you start a project and you're inevitably going to store more data on a user, right? Their preferences, their profile settings, and you have to kind of think like how you're going to do it from the start, because one way or another has quite an impact on your code. So the article has 4 methods: proxy model, the one-to-one with a profile table, and 2 forms of extending the abstract user base class. And especially those last 2 options are really, you want to do only from the start, and I believe before running the initial migrations, but I would have to look that up. For the platform, we actually went with the one-to-one model, the profile model, which might cause a few queries there, but it has never been really a performance issue. Does lead to pretty easy to maintain code. And we use the signal actually, or I think they're called signals, which is interesting to highlight. That when the user model gets created, you can use the receiver decorator with a post save, and then write literally 3 lines of code that the profile object gets created once the user object is created. So basically when a new user signs up to your Django app.
Right. And so if you need one table to, like, so you have a preferences table and a users table, and whatever you create the user, you want to automatically have the preferences created to defaults or whatever. And so you can wire it up, basically an event that is triggered through the ORM, that when you first create one, it's going to set this up and it's going to initialize it with one of these, right?
Correct. Yeah. And
Nice.
I think it's a nice trick to know about, like how you can signal one model to another and have the other model do something based on the other one. I think that's a useful trick.
Yeah. Well, I think an overall general principle that's really, I found really super valuable around like these kinds of models and database stuff is, as much as possible, use the ORM to do the default thing, like the add now, or auto now add, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Right. So when I create the object, if I don't set anything, a whole bunch of stuff will get filled out, and only the things that I have to specify do you have to actually go, right? As opposed to always updating the updated time yourself or something like that, right? So as much as you can lean on those things, and this is like a cross model version of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So usually when you want to do something, the ORM has a default way. Yes. So again, it comes back to the previous or tip number 3, like know the ORM pretty well, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. I don't know how you feel, but when I go around the internet, I feel like there's a lot of sites that just don't understand how their web app interacts with their database. You go there and it takes like 6 seconds for the page to load. Or, you go there and there's like 4 parts of the site that are like spinning little AJAX things for like 5 seconds. You're like, what is wrong with you? It cannot be this slow. Like, it just cannot. I don't care how many million records you have. You've got to be able to use an index and make this a little bit faster than this, right? And just, but it's ongoing, I think.
Oh, that's a good point. The database indexes, super important. Yeah. And,
and you can specify them in the models,
attribute
right?
Another attribute you can just specify there. Yep.
Yeah. I think indexes are
big deal.
Definitely indexes are like magic speed dust you can throw in your database. They're beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm not sure the ratio, but it can be 100 times faster, right? It's
easy.
Insane.
100 times faster. It's insane. Yeah. And it's like one little line of like index equals true type of stuff, right? It's so simple. Yeah. But people overlook it. So
No, especially in enterprise, with enterprise apps, they're always hammering on indexes. Yeah. It's very important.
I can imagine. All right. What's number 6?
Class-based views.
Yeah, so with class-based views, these are basically one class corresponds to a URL, but that has different functions to respond to the different HTTP verbs like get, post, put, that kind of stuff. Is that what these are, or are they different?
Yes, it's. I would have to look up the exact classes, but you have typically like list view, detail view, which then tie into the CRUD operations. Yes.
Right, so you can even have one for head, which is not that common, but sometimes, if you're looking for like a browser's looking for, should I actually download this thing? Tell me the E tag, last modified sort of thing. So I know whether or not my cache is still valid, stuff like that. Yeah. Very cool. Okay.
So yeah. And I'm kind of torn because I'm looking here at, one of, the apps for the 100 days of web where we showed function-based versus class-based. And I like them both because function-based, you kind of see what's happening, that you pull all the objects, then you render a template give it a dictionary of things you want to render in the template. So to me, that already looks pretty Pythonic and compact. But then if you compare the class-based, you see all that inheritance happening. For example, we have a quote list, which inherits from list view, which then is that magic superclass with all that default behavior, which is cool if you know them very well, but it can also be hiding a lot of stuff away. So for example, the list view, the only line there is model equals quote, which is saying like, build me a list view around that model. And then stuff magically happens, right? So it's cool, but it's also hiding a lot of stuff potentially.
Yeah. I hear exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I feel kind of the same way.
So, but it's definitely inheritance, and you can override certain methods. So if you know them well, it's pretty elegant and robust. Yeah.
Nice. All right, number 7. This also feels very much like the batteries included side of the Django story.
Yeah, I call it manage.py, and I guess it can be an episode in itself, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I just thought that to highlight a few kind of, how would you say, like meta things, how you manage that's why it's called manage.py, how you manage a Django app. Important is the migrate, of course. We all have used it. If you start a Django app, you run migrate, and a ton of stuff is shown because it comes with a lot of models, the user authentication stuff embedded. But for example, you can use fake initial on migrate. And then if the database is kind of further ahead and there's already stuff there, so it's out of sync, then fake initial is a way to kind of tell Django, well, if it's already in the database, ignore it, which can be useful if your database is out of sync. You have load data. For example, if you want to have a bunch of data in your initial database, which also sometimes is referred to as pictures, and you can give it a JSON file and pre-populate your database, which can be useful. Then we have shell, which is cool because if you do Python manage.py shell, you drop into the Django shell and you can play with the ORM directly. So you can do like from models import byte, and then it can do byte objects count, byte objects last, whatever ORM stuff. So it's a nice way to.
It's like a REPL for your web app.
A REPL for your web app, yeah, and you can play with the objects there. It's pretty useful.
Yeah, it's really handy because if you work with the ORM, you might have some of these linking auto features that set values. And if you flip over to the raw database, then all of a sudden you lose all that stuff that you've set up to help you kind of manage and make sure it's all consistent, right? This way you can kind of script around in there, but with that safety or whatever you call it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and if you load in your production database, you can actually do that on your live database. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
and useful if you want to debug something. Manage.py test to run the test. Not much more to say about that. Then most people that use Django will know, create super user. So that gives you a bunch of prompts to create a user with all the permissions, which is useful to have to quickly log into the backend. And the one I really like, lastly, is the Django commands. So you can write your own, kind of use it for cron jobs, for example. You can write a command which inherits from base command, and you override the handle method. And then typically for example, we use it to, for example, we have people on the platform doing trials, and the trials is 2 weeks, right? So after the 2 weeks, they're done with the trial, and we have to tweak a couple of settings on their profile to get rid of that access. And so we have a command that queries all the profile objects of people that have an active trial, and then compares like when they started the trial with daytime now or time zone now, and does one action or removes the access. And that's a script that's under the app management /commands/script. And then in Heroku, we use scheduler, and then we say, well, every day at 9 a.m., run that script. And if you have a script in management/commands, then manage.py recognizes that as a command. So if you put a script in there, then you can use it through the manage.py interface, which is pretty cool. So you can write your own cron jobs, basically.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Super cool. Yeah. No, that's really nice. So it basically lets you just add these commands and then tie it into the Heroku scheduler or Celery or something like that. Then it becomes this cool cron job that knows all about your site.
Yeah. So in the Heroku scheduler, we would define every day at 9 a.m., run Python manage.py, and then name of your command, which is the name of your script. And yeah, just like that.
Nice.
Yeah. We have here on the notes a template, some template code, how that would work. Maybe we can make a gist of that as well.
Yeah, I think we have to make some gists. Yeah. All right. Number 8 is all about middleware, which is code that runs that might see the request before it actually hits your in view methods or action methods, or potentially changes them after it's already been processed and decided, but before it actually goes out the web server to the end user. So it's like a before and after view of it, right?
Yeah, it's not super common, I think, but it's a nice way to have some sort of global layer in your pipeline, in the request pipeline of Django. And a practical example, how we used it on the platform was to, remember when we had to make those GDPR changes, like with the regulations and stuff?
Yeah, I know. So, we talked about this, and we all had to do weeks of rewriting stuff to make sure, even though it was in the same vein, it wasn't technically, matching every rule. So we had to go and, go through all that and make sure there was.
Yeah, it could be another episode, the stories we have from that one. But so we made all these changes, and we had to have some sort of form with already 10K users or more to have them kind of say yes to this at one time.
They had to have another acknowledgement the next time they visited the site.
Yeah, because
of where they came into, not through the login flow or whatever.
Yeah, because they were already a user, right? So they went through the registration flow. So we couldn't put it just there. We also had to do it for the existing users. So we wrote a middleware that redirected, that kept track if they had their consent, gave their consent on their profile. And if not, it would redirect them to that page, to that form, basically, where they would give their consent. And it was a nice way to enforce that login. That redirect based on a profile setting, basically. Yeah, so middleware was perfect there because it's kind of ruthless in it sits in front of all the requests.
That's a really, really good point, that it's ruthless and in a good way, in a sense, right? Like if you were to think, okay, well, users need to make sure, we got to make sure they accept the GDPR at this point before they go on. So let's check where they go and perform a byte, where they view their solution, maybe where they view their account, and where they log in. And there might be some other part of the site that you forgot about, right? And in addition to just having to modify all those places, it's super easy to forget one weird edge case. But with middleware, every request that hits Python, that hits Django, hits this thing, right? And so there's no escaping it. You've got to accept the thing or you're getting redirected.
Yeah, exactly. And I also linked here to a cool article, again, from Vitor Freitas, where he wrote a bunch of middleware to catch for any exception that is handling. He goes out to Stack Overflow. It's called the Stack Overflow exception troubleshooting. And only in debug mode, of course, it would list the
It'll
the
dump
top three
the first
answers.
Stack Overflow answer files. Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday and I was like, this is so cool. Like
that's
such
crazy.
Such a cool use case. So I just wanted
that's
to,
a wild use case. How interesting. I'm glad you're linking to that.
Okay.
The two places that I use that I'm really actively aware of using middleware in my sites, and Pyramid has middleware as well in Flask and so on. One is for things like Sentry, where it's looking at for any unhandled errors, and instead of just letting the server 500 page go back to the user, it'll catch it, report it, and then send it on, right? So it'll gather up all that information, and you basically just register that. You don't have to do a lot. And the other one is this thing I'll just throw out. I threw on the bonus round really, really quick. Is a thing called Secure Py, which will add all the headers that you should be adding for security, like do not allow my site to be embedded in an iframe on another site. Right. And the middleware will say, I don't care how you got to this request, but we're going to tell you can't embed this, whatever this is, on another site in an iframe. Things
that's
like
cool.
That, right? So it's super cool. And it's like literally 3 lines of code to do it. But because it's middleware, you're not forgetting it. The whole site just now all of a sudden adds the right extra security headers.
Yeah. If you're updating 20 views, then it's time to pause and reflect. Is there a better way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
So speaking of better ways, number 9, you should just put your API keys and your passwords right inside the code, right? But not the view method, probably. No? No? Okay.
Well, you mean
tell me about
like committing your secret key to version control?
I'm just kidding. Yes.
I know it's that's an important thing. There's stuff that you, of course, should keep out of version control. The way to do that is to, for example, have a .env file, and which you then ignore in your .git ignore, and then those keys are hidden forever, right? But you still need to reference them in your settings.py, and there are 2 packages that make it pretty friendly and easy. First one is python-decouple, and you import, for example, from decouple import config and maybe CSV, depending on the setting. And then you can just do secret key equals config and then the key, right? Secret key, which is the actual secret key line in your .env file. So it magically knows that there's an env file, reads it in, and extracts the key from it. So really nice plugin to handle your settings. And
this is really cool. I hadn't heard of that one. That's neat.
Yeah, I always recommend it to anybody using Django, really, to just pip install Python decouple and make their lives easier.
Yeah.
And similarly for the database, you can use DJ-database-URL. Very similar to decouple, that it uses the config method. And you can just give it default equals config and the database URL. And yeah, so as you see here, we can put the snippet in the show notes. The database is dictionary config section is very compact. You don't have to, well, obviously you have to have the right database URL string in your .env file, but it's much easier. It feels.
Right. And database strings often contain username, passwords, host names, host ports, all the kind of stuff that you kind of not want to share.
Yeah. No, that needs to be all hidden away. Yeah. And one tip I do have regarding the .env file. So as the .env file is hidden from version control, it won't show up on GitHub. So I recommend to commit a .env.example file with the same strings, with the same keys, but of course, so the same, for example, secret key, allowed host, and then of course not the actual data, but just as a way to communicate to other developers, like this is the env file we're going to use. So copy this to a .env file and put in your credentials there. But it's a nice way to communicating.
Type the actual database connection string here. Type the actual, encryption key here, whatever, AWS key there.
Right, because the platform has like 20 or 30 of those variables. And if somebody would start developing on that project, how do they know, right, what to set? Unless you run server and it just, starts screaming about missing
values
keys.
until it crashes. Yeah. The thing is, though, sometimes those don't crash right away, right? Like maybe you have a MailChimp API key, and the only time that's going to scream and crash is when you actually try to register a new user, not log in an existing one, or something weird like that. And then like you you push it to production and bad things happen.
And it's a silent error. That's the worst.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's better if stuff blows up than it goes silent. Like the Zen of Python, right? No errors should pass silently. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. All right. Big drum roll for number 10, even though we'll do a quick bonus round at the end as well.
Yeah. 10, it's a big one. Build in template tags and filters. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there. I think it's just good to, as you're writing a lot of templates where you're going to reference the objects that you pass in from the views, it's kind of handy to know how to do that. So I will just go over a few ones we learned about and use. So for example, you have the list of book objects, and you look through them, but sometimes there are no books, right? So instead of like doing if books, loop over the books, and else there are no books, you can actually do for empty. And that's kind of a construct that Django has, that if there are no objects, then it goes into the empty block. It's just shorter, right?
Oh my God. Is this a proper use for like an else block on a for in loop?
Something like that.
It might be actually. So you've got the syntax, you've got the angle bracket % for book in books, li curly book, right? So that would be, and then you would say end for, and that would just print out a bunch of LIs with the various books that were in the list.
Yeah.
But like you said, you're going to want to deal with it if it's not there. So instead of doing a whole nother test and an else, like you can just say for books, li, then % empty. Sorry, there are no books, end for, and it's all like one continuous thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I guess there's no shame in doing an if else performance wise, I guess, but it's just shorter code, right? It's more elegant. And again, it all goes back like knowing about those constructs.
Yeah. And it's more expressive. It's like,
yeah,
here's the thing to put when it's empty, not, oh, I see. It means that if this thing is false, then we have nothing. But if it's true, then we can go into its book list inside. And like, it's more clear about like, here's the empty case.
So it's more explicit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And also to get really nerdy, like in those templates, you get to a lot of indents already because HTML is like that if you properly format it.
Oh, it's so bad.
So that extra if else you can save there is just nice, right?
2 to 4 spaces less. It's good.
Yeah.
Talk Python to Me is partially supported by our training courses. How does your team keep their Python skills sharp? How do you make sure new hires get started fast and learn the Pythonic way? If the answer is a series of boring videos that don't inspire, or a subscription service you pay way too much for and use way too little, listen up. At Talk Python Training, we have enterprise tiers for all of our courses. Get just the one course you need for your team with full reporting and monitoring. Or ditch that unused subscription for our course bundles, which include all the courses, and you pay about the same price as a subscription. Once. For details, visit training.talkpython.fm/business or just email sales@talkpython.fm.
Then what we use a lot is overriding blocks. So in the base template, you can define a block, for example, title of the website. And then it's again an example like class-based views of inheritance. Then if you go into the child template, you can just specify a block title and then give it some other content. So in the base template, you kind of set the expectations. They're going to be blocks of ABC. And then in the child template, you can then actually populate those blocks. And I think the advantage is that sometimes a title, for example, needs to go high up in the order of HTML. So you have to the order of the elements on the page, you have to have it in your base template. And so it's a nice way to set it there and then come back in the child and set it to something else. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I love these types of things that I have on all the sites that I run. I have 3 or 4 that are always there. Obviously the main content, right? Like whatever the page content's going to be, there's going to be one for that. This title one is super important because you want to be able to set like literally the angle bracket title, but there's not really a good way to get into that space from a base template, a derived template, right? It's got to like reach and poke a hole up there. The 2 other that I always have are like extra CSS and extra JavaScript. So like in this page, in this few pages, I need to have one more CSS file, or I need to have like this one page is going to use Vue.js and be like a single page app, but not the rest of the stuff. So on this one, I'm going to like punch the Vue.js stuff at the end or something like that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, for example, maybe on your checkout page, you want to have the Stripe JavaScript library, but not on all pages, right?
Yeah,
so you can do that extra JavaScript and then have that script import there, although it might not be nice to have that. I mean, if it's strict HTML, but
No, I'm pretty sure like that's probably exactly what I have. That's a perfect use case. It's something like that only appears on a few pages. You don't want to bundle the Stripe. I don't even know if it makes sense in terms of their API to like minify and bundle their JavaScript with yours. It needs to come from their site live. And so, yeah, exactly. But you want to stick it in the right place, not just randomly in the middle of the page. So these little like block overrides are just perfect.
Yeah. Cool. So never hard code URLs or static files. You can set the static at the top of your template and then just reference static and then the relative URL. Or URL to link to another page on your web app. You can just use the URL and then reference the name of the URL as you set that in your urls.py. So the example here, we have curly braces, percentage, and then URL keyword, and then the string login, and that then matches to the login path in the urls.py because we named it that explicitly. That's a good thing to know. Don't go hard code URLs because you switch domain or whatever, and that will all break, right?
Yeah, super cool.
Other thing I like is filters. So I have a tags.py file, and we have a bunch of register.filter decorators. So for example, here we wrote one that's is new with that receives a datetime and that looks if that datetime is less than 7 days in the past. So if something is a week old. So, and then we use it in the template. For example, we have byte.edit, and that's again that edit field that was with the outer now. And then we can do pipe is new. It goes a bit into the weeds, but basically applying that is new filter on a date in the template, you can kind of play with it. And what we do, for example, is to give it a class and then I guess show a new image on it.
Put a little new badge or something on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess if we post the snippet, it makes more sense. But yeah, basically it's a way to write a filter, and that you don't have to do a lot of if else and complex logic in the template, but you have that actually in the backend, and then you can just use it as on the object in the template. I guess.
Yeah.
Let's show the code in the gist.
Yeah, we'll have to show the code, but yeah, it's a cool way to basically put a little pipe filtering operator on there, and it runs a little bit of custom code that you write.
Yeah.
You write it in Python, it runs it in templates. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's well stated, I think. Yeah. It's, and you could do anything, right? So it's pretty robust.
So when I'm looking through this, you're talking about templates a lot. A little while ago, we talked about how it was nice to start out with some code, or when you're creating these pages, maybe the database is empty, but you want some stuff in the page because it's super hard to actually see what's going on and design the pages without some content. So maybe some kind of lorem ipsum.
Yep. That's one that that comes out of the box, right?
I was so surprised that Django has lorem ipsum built into it.
Must be in high demand,
Exactly. Now, it would be better. I mean, this is pretty good. It would be better if it were hipster ipsum, which is like lorem ipsum, but speaks hipster speak, I guess you would call it. Like Stumptown, XOXO, Keytar, Semiotics, PBR, and NP, Street Art, Blue Bottle before they sold out, pop-up mixtape, and so on. Of course, Portland shows up in here.
That's
but
awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, if people are looking for like lorem ipsum filler, there's actually like a lorem ipsum operation, like empty as well in Django.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, let me see. Let me pull it really quick just to see the tag. It is, you just do %lorem count method randomness close % close curly, and boom, out it comes. It's beautiful.
Yeah, look at that. Lorem 2w random will output 2 random Latin words. How cool is that?
Yeah, so that's really cool actually that it's built right into the templates. And what's nice is you don't have to have like paragraphs of junk that you're going to then delete. You have literally like just a little bit with like, I want 20 words here. Yeah. Right. So super cool.
Or remember when you were coding one time, like a pretty print of how much time a comment was posted, like 4 days and 6 hours ago. So I actually thought that was Humanize, and I guess Humanize can do that, but it's actually here on the tags page. Time since, yeah.
Oh, really? Like it takes a date time and then it will like humanize it into
Yeah,
like half an hour ago, a week ago.
Yeah.
So, that is super cool. Yeah, I love to see dates like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we use that on our messages and forums. It's super nice. It just reads
it's perfect.
nicer, and you don't have to write that logic, right? It just comes in a template.
Perfect. That's awesome.
We're spoiled.
Some of the batteries. All right. So are you ready for a bonus round?
Yeah. Let's do a bonus round.
Let's do it. All right. So bonus number 1, hit us.
Okay. And I've not used this that much, but playing with it yesterday, it's actually pretty cool. It's Django extensions. And I will just highlight a few things you can do. You can do Python, manage.py, graph models, and then -a, -o, and then a PNG. And it will make a PNG or ping, whatever you call it, of all your models in your
So it'll
database.
create like a UML diagram of your Django ORM models, basically.
Yeah, something like that, and how they're linked together. Yeah, mine is
I don't know
super
if it's
small.
Formally UML, but yeah, it's definitely more or less, yeah.
Yeah, it's so small because there's so many models in our thing, but pretty cool.
Exactly.
Like how you can visualize that, I guess, if you would, get more developers on board.
Yeah, you talked about shell.
Yeah, I mentioned shell before, and there's actually a shell _plus that comes with the Django extensions, and then you can also give it --IPython, and then you drop into an IPython shell. And it also imports all your models, so you don't have to import them manually. So that's pretty convenient. And not part of the Django extension, but I did want to mention is a plugin called Django-TinyMCE, which gives you a rich text editing field. And it's pretty sweet.
Cool. Yeah, so TinyMCE is like a WYSIWYG, what you get, HTML editor, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So this like brings it in or something, like makes it easy to use in Django?
Yeah, so you would use the HTML field. So from tinymce.models import HTML field. So it would, of course, cause another migration. But yeah, it's pretty easy to use, and it's a huge improvement for the end user, right? So
yeah, that's super cool. While you're on the topic of that, I'll throw one more out there, is simplemde.com. So TinyMCE is cool, but I think the ultimate outcome is HTML, and simplemde is a beautiful markdown editor that's just pure JavaScript, pure client-side JavaScript. It has like hotkeys, it has side-by-side synchronized scrolling, all like even the markdown, like the text in markdown, even though it's plain text, it's like the headings are bigger than the code bits and whatnot. It's really easy. Just throw it on a text area.
Looks super nice. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's very nice. Just turn off spell checker. It'll tell you everything's misspelled. It's annoying. All right, our bonus number 2. Keep it flying. Celery.
Yeah, Celery, really want to mention that because we're, especially in the enterprise where I see Django, I see Celery. Like, it's just always tasks that have to be offloaded and be done async wise. It makes sense, right?
Right. Some things are just not meant to be done in the context of a direct request. I learned this the hard way with my site. So there's a back end that will let me email the people in a particular course. Like, so I could go, if there's an update, like a problem with the course, I can go into that course to email everybody who subscribed here. The first time I didn't really think this all the way through. I went in and I filled out an email, hit go, and it just sat there and it spun and it spun and it spun. And then eventually it timed out after like 20 seconds and crashed. I'm like, oh no. So it emailed like thousands of people, but I don't know who actually got the email because I said everybody, and it got partway through and then crashed. And so then what do? I email them again? The first half will get the double. The second half didn't get it at all. Like, I'm just like, what have I done? What a fool. Yeah, so don't do that. That's a bad experience.
But now your Sunday evening will be shorter, right? Because you know the ORM, and you can. But yeah, you would have to write some sort of script to see who got emailed or not. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I go like scrape the logs or something, right? Like
exactly.
It was really,
yeah,
I basically decided, well, I guess the other half of the class is just not getting that message. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So now with Celery, right? You would click send, and you would be immediately back at from the request cycle, so back at your interface.
Right. Dump it in a queue, throw it at Celery, and say, start emailing these people.
It's on the queue, and it's all happening in the background. Yeah. So that's,
nice.
And, you know, for other things like heavy file processing, anything intensive, send it to a queue, right? Because the user shouldn't be waiting for that.
I think even for some of my stuff, I started doing logging on a queue. I'm just like, I don't want this, whatever this is, I don't want it to like be part of this request. I'm just going to throw it over there and we'll get to it in a minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a quick debugging tip. If you want to debug celery, actually, sometimes it's convenient to not send it to a queue and have it as part of your main process. And you can set celery underscore always underscore eager equals true in your settings. And then then it doesn't go to a task queue anymore, but it goes straight to your main console where you have run server running. And it's just easier to debug. So just want to mention that tip that's not very well documented, but it definitely helped me on a few occasions.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome. I definitely need to make better use of celery in what I'm doing as well. All right, last one. This one I just threw on there, so I'll tell you about it, Bob.
Cool.
I told you that there's like all these headers you should be putting into your code, into your HTTP response. And if you go look at the OWASP top 10 web vulnerabilities, the Open Web Security Group or whatever that OWASP stands for, they go through and they keep track of all the problems, right? And some of those can be, cross-site scripting, embedding your stuff in something that looks like your site, like embed something that basically is your site in an iframe, but then put a transparent overlay that captures keystrokes for, like, say, username and password, all sorts of bad stuff like that. So there's all these headers you should send back. So if you use this thing called secure.py, which is github.com/type/secure.py, and I don't know how they got this, but it's pip install secure, which is incredible that that's still available. But the idea is it just, on any of these frameworks, including Django, it will just, as middleware, just drop in all the changes you need. And it's like, for Django, let's see, what does it take? Oh, no, that's just the Django. There's a super simple integration on how to set it up. I got to pull up the docs. Anyway, it's really super easy. And then you get things like strict transport security, cross-site protection, X-frame options, the same origin, like all those kinds of things that you would like to have that you might forget. And because it's middleware, it's just like magic.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? And it works with like 15 different frameworks or 10 different frameworks. It's really almost no matter what you're using, it works with it,
Yeah. Wow. And you just added to middleware with app.secure middleware.set secure headers. Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah. It's literally like one function, like a simple decorator that you write, more or less. Simple middleware. Yeah, you just add it in there and off it goes. So it integrates just like you'd expect. Anyway, That's just, it's so easy to add that security. And who knows, if something else comes out that you're supposed to start doing, secure.py might get updated and your site will just magically be more secure and you don't have to think about that, which is always nice.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
Really cool. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Of course. All right, well, we did it. We didn't take 4 hours to cover that, even though it did take some time. I mean, you guys who are listening and can't see, there's a ton of details we kind of skipped over. We could have gone in so deep, right? Like you said, with manage.py is probably its whole episode. For example, we've got Django test, we've got Django REST framework, we got Wagtail, we got Sentry, Django channels. We haven't even touched on authentication. There's all sorts of stuff, right? That
you did mention Sentry. You did mention Sentry.
I did, but not as an official item, but
I'm glad you did.
Threw it in there. Yeah, Sentry's cool.
Because there were some definitely, 500 errors we would have never known about. Not affiliated or anything. It's real life use.
They're so rare. They're so rare, and they're under weird edge cases. And if you run a website, you should definitely install something like Sentry or Rollbar or something like that, where you get notifications anytime there's an error. At first, it's annoying. Like, there's certain things that you can't control. Somebody will try to, post a binary thing to some part of your API where it expects like Latin characters. So you'll get like a non-Latin parse error. You're like, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about this, but you could start muting those types of things. And eventually you'll be like, oh, I got these errors. And literally, I would say certainly more than one time, I have seen an error come in over one of those channels, figured out what was going on, fixed it, and then sent a message to the user and said, I'm sorry, I saw you had this error. I fixed it. And they're like, well, I was just about to write you. This is crazy that I didn't even tell you there was an error and you fixed it and contacted me.
That's so cool, right? Yeah. Yeah, because often they, 500 error, this sucks, and they go away, right?
Exactly.
And now you're proactive about it. So that really makes a difference.
Yeah. And even if they're mad and they go away and they've lost faith, whatever, there's nothing you can do to change the past, but your site is better every time you catch one of these errors that you wouldn't have caught. So
but I agree that a lot of time it's like edge cases, but sometimes there's something that might indicate a bigger problem. So it's good to know.
Right. Or you deploy something that's bad and all of a sudden it's like gone crazy and your email and text messages are full. You're like, whoa, I better go check this out. This is not good.
Yeah, it feels a bit safer, right? do a git push to having that
it's a bit
alert
safer.
system. Yeah.
At least you'll see the smoke if it catches on fire.
Yeah.
All right. Well, these are really fun things to cover, Bob. And I think people really enjoy them. We can put together some of them just, and we'll try to link to the others in the show notes.
Yeah, cool. We'll do.
Yeah, but you don't get out of here without answering the final two questions.
Uh-oh.
So if you're going to write some Django code, what editor to use?
Yeah, I still use Vim. It won't go away. Yeah, it's, as I always say, it's a steep learning curve, right? The beginning was very awkward using that editor, but it has this compound effect. And once you get to a lot of shortcuts, and you just become pretty fast in it, and it's very convenient. But I'm missing out on all the IDE features, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. You want to hear a little Vim joke?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I might.
Yeah. So how do you generate a random string?
Yeah, I know. Trying to exit it.
You put a first-year computer science student in Vim and ask them to exit.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, that's all good. All right. Yeah. And then we covered so many packages here, but maybe just throw out a couple of packages that you're like, man, people need to know about this thing.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of abuse the fact that we had to leave some out to pull them in here. So we didn't talk about
this is like the bonus round.
The bonus. So Django All Out is a great package or plugin to really make your authentication in Django easy. Mm-hmm. And Django REST framework, I still find it a great package offer to build APIs in Django. But if it doesn't have to be Django, then let's throw in python-decouple, which is really cool.
Yeah, python-decouple is awesome. I love its ability to parse stuff without me having to think too much about it.
The fuzzy parsing, right?
Yes, exactly. It almost always works. It is so nice.
Because you don't have to remember strp time. You just throw it into parse, and it magically converts it to a datetime object, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some site, and I can't remember what it is. I know I covered it on PythonBites, but unfortunately, I'm not tracking it down right now. There's a site that will let you type in a human readable string and then tell you the format string that goes with it. Oh, it's so nice.
Oh, no, that's cool.
Yeah, so you type like Wednesday at 2 p.m. and it'll actually pull it up. Nah, I can't find it. Oh, well. Anyway, yeah,
that's cool.
Long story short, this is a great package if you're parsing things, python-decouple.
Yeah, and now can I mention another one?
Go for it.
So if you're working a lot with databases, which obviously happens when you do web development in Django, for Postgres, PGCLI. PGCLI is like a way nicer interface than PSQL.
Yeah.
So just pip install it, and you'll have a lot more fun working with Postgres databases from the command line.
Nice. Do you know one? I know one that you recommended was SQLite Browser at SQLiteBrowser.org, which is pretty cool, but that's just for SQLite. Have you come across Beekeeper Studio at beekeeperstudio.io?
No.
Oh my goodness. So this is a free open source database GUI for Postgres, SQLite, SQL Server, presumably also Oracle. Works on all the platforms. And man, it is cool. You can even have like saved queries you typically run. It has autocomplete, all kinds of stuff.
Wow, that looks really nice.
It looks good, right? Like it's something you look like you'd want to use. Yeah, like even just an autocomplete query thing, Composer, is pretty cool. So anyway.
We need to link to that as well.
Yeah. If we're going to throw out some database management stuff, that's a really good one. I should definitely, I'll put that in there as well.
Cool.
All right. Well, we covered a lot of stuff. What a whirlwind, but it was really fun. So I guess final call to action. People are all excited about what you've talked about. Also, maybe they're interested to see how you've taken some of these ideas and put them into action over at Code Challenges. Final call to action. What should people do?
Yeah, so we don't have byte exercises on Django. That was a bit hard, but regardless.
Yeah, it's hard to set up the whole server and database infrastructure in like a little tiny bit, right?
That might be possible. It's just, I think we do have a Flask byte, so I think it's possible because we can install any packages on our AWS Lambdas, right?
Right.
But regardless, go to codechallenge.es and go write some code. That's the best thing you can do if you want to learn Python. And you can also reach out to me via our Slack. So if you go to pybit.es, there on the resources, there's a community link.
Anybody join your Slack there?
Yeah, that's totally for the community.
You've got a really, really vibrant and self-sustaining Slack channel for Python developers, like more than most other places I've seen, which is really cool. I don't know, you've got thousands of people in there, right?
Yeah, I think we crossed the 2,000 mark. And it's awesome how people are interacting, responding, helping each other. It's such a nice place. Yeah.
So they go to codechallenge.es/community. Is that it?
No, there is a Slack a logo on the platform, but if you just want the link, then you can also just go to pybit.es, and under the resources drop down, there's a community link. And
right. Cool.
Because Slack sometimes the invite link
don't get me started
expires or whatever.
Don't get me started on getting joined into Slack, man.
Yeah, so just have a dedicated page, and if you go to pybit.es, then that always works.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on here and talk all about this. And congratulations on going full-time on your project. Awesome. Good work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great fun.
Yeah, you bet. As always. See ya.
All right. Yes, bye.
This has been another episode of Talk Python to Me. Our guest on this episode was Bob Belderbos, and it's been brought to you by Linode and us over at Talk Python Training. Start your next Python project on Linode's state-of-the-art cloud service. Just visit talkpython.fm/Linode, Linode. You'll automatically get a $20 credit when you create a new account. Want to level up your Python? If you're just getting started, try my Python Jumpstart by Building 10 Apps course. Or if you're looking for something more advanced, check out our new async course that digs into all the different types of async programming you can do in Python. And of course, if you're interested in more than one of these, be sure to check out our Everything Bundle. It's like a subscription that never expires. Be sure to subscribe to the show. Open your favorite podcatcher and search for Python. We should be right at the top. You can also find the iTunes feed at /iTunes, the Google Play feed at /Play, and the direct RSS feed at /RSS on talkpython.fm. This is your host, Michael Kennedy. Thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Now get out there and write some Python code.